Long-distance travel is common among cars today, with cars being able to easily travel between states. Cars can go from coast to coast with making a couple of stops at a time. Speed is a commonly wanted thing among car companies and car guys. Almost seem like they're speed demons, trying to go faster and faster each time. Cars being able to go over 300 miles per hour, how can you blame them? Bugatti and Koenigsegg have been going at it head-to-head to make the fastest cars possible. But if you can only go on streets and back roads, how fast and far could you go? Cars have improved a lot over the years, with hundreds of thousands of upgrades and thousands of different models and cars that you can choose from. But if you have a car, you're going to need some sort of road. What if you had no highway and had to use back roads and streets for the rest of your life? How would you travel long distances or between states, or would you even travel at all? What would the U.S. look like then, and how would cars adapt to this new U.S. without the interstate highway system? How did Eisenhower come up with the interstate highway system? Eisenhower was in the Army. Though he didn't get to go to Europe, which he originally wanted to, he was in the tank corps. He volunteered for the U.S. Army's first transcontinental convoy, July to September 1919, to accompany a small Renault tank. His experience on the convoy helped him understand the need for better roads, while his experiences on Germany's Autobahn expressway network convinced him of the need for broader ribbons across the land. The German Autobahn system is what inspired Eisenhower to make the IHS. The Autobahn was an idea for many years before it came, and there are many reasons why it came to be. However, the bigger reasons as to why it was made were for military use, job relief, and a way for Germany to modernize and promote individual mobility. The U.S. looked very different before the interstate highway system was ever made, and before it was finished, it already had a big impact on the U.S. Before the interstate highway system was even made, it already had a great impact on the U.S. economy. Thousands of miles of highway had to be made, and this gave a lot of people jobs under the Interstate Highway Act of 1956. Then, after the IHS was made, it made the sale of trades much easier because now the West and the East Coast have a way of selling goods to each other besides the use for trains. And it made hauling goods to other places much easier as well. Before the IHS was made, the only way to go from one side of the country to the other was the Lincoln Highway system, or taking a train. The Lincoln Highway wasn't the best way to go from coast to coast by car at the time. But at the time it was the best way. With low bridges, narrow roads, and sketchy ways that would make most people say, hell no. It's pretty easy to see why people would rather prefer to travel by train. But a group of people had a different idea in mind, and wanted to see just how accessible the Lincoln Highway was.
It all started here, 102 years ago. 79 vehicles departed from the White House's ellipse at 11:15 a.m. on July 7, 1919. They snaked through the district streets before crossing into Maryland and stopping for lunch in Rockville at 12:30 p.m. The coupling on one of their kitchen trailers broke, and a car's fan belt too, but all in all, it was an uneventful 7-hour, 46-mile, 74-kilometer journey to the Frederick Fairgrounds. 12.5 hours later, they woke up, left, drove, arrived, and slept again. This cycle repeated itself. Day after day, they cut 40 or 50 or 60 miles deeper into their westward journey. The convoy climbed through the heights of the Appalachian Mountains, trekked through the mud of Ohio, before crossing the Mississippi River at 4:10 p.m. on July 22nd. From there, they entered an area defined by desolation. Few dared venture west in a motor vehicle in 1919, always opting for the relative comfort and speed of passenger trains. This convoy, though, was making the journey specifically to determine just how difficult this feat was, to what extent such a journey was feasible for military logistics purposes. The answer came quickly. Despite routing themselves on the most developed transcontinental road of the time, the Lincoln Highway, they constantly had to divert around disrepair, physically disassemble covered bridges to get their trucks through, and fight physics on roads too narrow for an oncoming car to pass. Gas stations were few and far between, so such travel required truly expedition-level planning. Each time they entered a city, though, they were greeted by hordes of intrigued locals and dignitaries But those crowds thinned as the convoy crawled further into the desolate West. Most, but certainly not all, of their vehicles successfully traversed the Rockies, and the same can be said for their trip across some of the Lincoln Highway's roughest roads in Utah. With time, though, the trend reversed, roads improved, and they finally saw pavement again as the convoy entered California, its final state. After a final evening in Oakland, California, the vehicles loaded onto a ferry, crossed the bay, and made a ceremonious arrival in San Francisco, accompanied by a massive parade and a formal dinner. That was September 6, 1919, 62 days after their departure from the White House ellipse. Having concentrated nearly all their waking hours on driving, the math works out to an average travel speed of just 5.65 miles or 9 kilometers per hour. A staggeringly slow pace on a road branded as a highway in a year featuring technology such as electric refrigerators, airplanes, and long-distance phone service.
How did cars adapt to this new stretch of road? Cars before the interstate highway system weren't necessarily made for long distance travel, with most people not leaving the states they lived in. Let's take a look at a couple of cars before long distance travel became more popular. The Chevrolet Bel Air, a popular car in the 1950s, was dubbed the Hot One, an American muscle car that could go 0 to 60 in 20 seconds. Not that fast for today's standards, but back then it was a speedster. After the interstate highway system was finished, many things happened to cars for them to meet the expectations of this new type of travel. We got more powerful engines, automatic transmission, power steering, better brakes, and more comfort and cosmetic features that make driving more enjoyable. Almost 70 years later, and cars have adapted beyond our expectations. Today, cars are used for many different things, from climbing up steep roads and mountains in Arizona to going over 300 miles per hour in Germany. It's pretty easy to overlook where everything came from. Let's take a look at Chevrolet today. The Corvette ZR1 was a speed demon out of the dealership, with over 1,000 horsepower and a top speed of 233 miles per hour. A 0 to 60 time of 2.3 seconds. That would pass the Chevrolet Bel Air like it was standing still. Cars have gone over the rails with speed, performance, and technology, but not everything is about speed. Let's take a look at how cars have improved in other ways. Long distance travel. Most people have to drive whether they're going to work, getting groceries, or moving from place to place. Cars have adapted to this new long range travel. Cars being able to go hundreds of miles at a time. And if the top car is having a mileage of 50 plus miles per gallon. Today, the car industry is flooded with manufacturers, most of whom are from Germany, America, China, Japan, and Italy. All of these countries have produced cars that are great when it comes to many things. What would cars look like if there wasn't the interstate highway system? And what would the US look like? Lots of things would have changed, starting with car design and performance. Without the interstate highway system, top speeds and highway comfort wouldn't be a priority. Cars might stay smaller, slower, and more city-oriented. So the suspension and handling would be tuned more for potholes, stop-and-go traffic, and winding rural roads, rather than smooth, long-distance drives. Fuel efficiency might become a bigger priority sooner, since there wouldn't be the same kind of long-distance travel demand. Growth of regional versus national auto markets. Without a fast national road network, regional car styles might persist longer. Think Detroit sedans in the Midwest or trucks built more for off-road or rural utility in the South and West. Car companies might focus more on city-specific models or smaller cars adapted to urban city centers rather than the big land yachts of the 50s to 70s. Rise of alternative transport. Railroads, taxis, and buses might hold on to dominance longer or even evolve faster. Air travel might become more dominant in more areas since long-distance driving would be less viable. Urban development would be wildly different. No IHS means no suburban explosion like we saw post-World War II. Suburban areas would grow more slowly or might become more limited and dense. Walking cities might dominate. Parking infrastructure and strip malls might become less popular. The interstate highway system was one of the best ideas the U.S. ever had, with almost every American using it in their day-to-day life. The interstate highway system brought many wins to the U.S., with it helping the trade of goods, movement of people, and the overall growth of the United States.